The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod. We're coming to you live from the Warner Center in Woodland Hills, California. Delighted to be with you here on this Wednesday, and we've got big news. I know that we've been promising you our new website for quite a while, and the fact of the matter is that we are in beta right now. So I'm going to tell you, you can go to the old site, which is autism-live.com, and be watching us. But we would love it if a bunch of you would take a tootle over to http://beta.autism-live.com and take a look. You can even ask questions on the new format that's there. I'm going to tell you describe both formats for you. But before we get to all of that, I'll come back to this particular beta site to tell you some of the cool things about it. But especially on the new site is the brand new Autism Live 2018 Toy and Gift Guide. And you'll see a little toy guide icon at the top of the page, and you can click on that and it will take you to the interactive toy guide where you can read about all the things that we're recommending in all the different age ranges and categories and what won which award, because there's like a top sensory award, there's a top therapist award, a top parent award, all of those different things. But this year you can actually purchase the toys from that site by just clicking on the buy button, and it will take you to the site where you can purchase it, because that was the one thing that you guys asked for last year. So that's there. Now, as to everything else, and Gabriel is starting to show you a bunch of the different ways that you can connect with us. And while he's doing that, I want to remind you that our old site is still there, which is autism-live.com. That's going to be there for a few more days as we beta the new website. And by the way, if you see that a button doesn't work or something isn't quite flowing the way we had hoped it would on the beta site, please write to me and let me know. That's what a beta phase is all about, right? But in a few days, we will shift from the beta to the regular. So when you go to autism-live.com, you'll get the new website. But you know, we know that sometimes people get used to doing things the old way. And if you want to go to the old site, you will still be able to go to old autism-live.com and be able to partake there. Now, if you still want to ask a question on the current site, all you have to do is put your little cursor in the box that says your question, and you type and you hit enter, right? Now, that takes up a large portion of the screen on our current website. When you go to the beta site, what you will see, first thing that's going to happen is there is going to be a pop-up that's going to ask you if you want to subscribe to our mailing list, because if you're not getting our viewer guides and you want to, that's the quickest way to do that. You can either do it and say submit, and then it will go away, or you can click the little X and make it go away. We're not going to make that pop up every 30 seconds like a lot of websites do, but you are going to get that at the start of the website. Then you're going to see all the fabulous things that there are to see there, and it's really cool. It's more like a Netflix site that you can scroll through and see so many videos. It's really fun. But way down in the bottom in the corner, it says ask a question. And if you click on that, a pop-up window comes up, and that's where you type and ask your question, so that you can be watching the screen and seeing the live feature. There will be a button that flashes up in the top that says that we are live. And if you want to click that, it will take it to full screen, and there'll be a button that you can push to make the screen small. We really wanted to be able to give you the best viewing experience and the best opportunity to see the library of videos that we have. And there's a new and better search feature so that you can be searching all the different websites. And there is even a button at the top where you can search the Ask Dr. Doreen topics that we've been telling you. You could go to the card site to do that. Now you can do it from Autism Live as well. Very exciting. We want to thank everyone who's been working on that tirelessly for about a year and a half. So super fabulous. We got a big show for you today in just a second. Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh is here with us for Ask Dr. Doreen. She'll be answering your questions. And then a little bit later on in the next hour, Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. Nancy Allspot Jackson will join me. And our fabulous guest today is Vince Redmond. He is a licensed marriage and family therapist who has also had experience actually doing ABA therapy as a therapist. So he understands both sides of what you're having to deal with. He's going to be talking with us a little bit later on. And plus we have a lot of exciting news and other really important things for you, including answering your questions. So without further ado, it is time for Ask Dr. Doreen.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh is the
Dr. Doreen is an expert in autism.
Doreen Granpeesheh.
Dr. Granpeesheh.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh is a visionary in the field of autism. Now you can ask her questions on Ask Dr. Doreen.
Welcome to Ask Dr. Doreen. We're here with Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh. She is a true expert in the field of autism, been working in this field, shockingly, for 40 years. I still can't say that comfortably. She certainly doesn't look like it. Let's say that. But working in this field of autism, working with very young children all the way up through senior citizens and everything in between, individuals who are mildly experiencing autism and those who are very profoundly affected.
Right.
And really, I say this all the time, you're a visionary in this field.
Thank you very much, Shannon.
You are somebody who has such compassion for all members of the autism community, the individual themselves. I think you do some of the best perspective taking I've not only experienced in my life, but seen, that you're able to look at things and say, what is it like for this individual? But also, what is it like for the siblings? What is it like for the family? What is it like for the caregivers? What is it like for the people who are delivering therapy? And to try to take care of everyone within that circle, which is a tough thing. But you've done a great job.
I tried. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And it's, I don't think I'll ever be able to fully comprehend what it is like to be a parent. But it is the one that motivates me the most. So I'm all about trying to understand what the parents go through.
Well, I got to say, you get it better than anybody else
Thank
who doesn't
you.
have a child on the spectrum.
Thank you very much.
I think you get it better than I do sometimes. So, and for those of you who don't know, I am a very proud parent of a young man who was diagnosed with autism at the age of 2.5. There is a question that I'm going to get to eventually that somebody had said, you say your son is recovering from ASD. Are you saying that there's a cure? We're going to get to that. We're going to put that one on pause for a second.
That's a big question.
It is a big question, and it will take us a little while to get there. But first, we had a question that came in last week after, like right as we were ending, from a mom who's written to us a couple of times before. She and I had a little bit of a conversation after she wrote in this question, because I didn't want to make her wait an entire week for somebody to say something to her.
Of course.
So I just 3 seconds ago handed you the sort of back and forth that we've had going back. But while you're looking at that, I'm going to read the first part of the question.
Sure.
Hi, Shannon and Dr. Doreen. Hope you are both well. I wrote to you at the end of August concerning my son and his increasing anxiety. My son is 13 years old, has ASD, ADHD, and a learning disability. Last week, his consult has finally prescribed him 10 milligrams a day of fluoxetine, I always murder the names of the medicines, to try and help with his anxiety. I'm really hoping the medication helps give him a bit of ease. He's very vocal about his worries, and I'm trying to find ways to help him deal with these. School is very difficult for him as he's in a class that has very challenging children. The class is very unsettled, and he is so aware of others' feelings. He's exhausted when he gets home from school. He constantly needs reassurance from me and suffers from separation anxiety, especially from me. We have a worry plaque and a feelings journal, but we're constantly using these. I'm not sure if there's anything else I could be doing. I feel very helpless at the moment, and I'm worried about his mental health. And you know, I had written back to her to say that we would put it at the top of the hour, and also to say, you know, I have been a classroom teacher for many years, and I have concerns always if a classroom is a mess, and the person who's in charge of the classroom can't contain people's behaviors, everyone suffers. Absolutely everyone. And so, that's a concern for me, and I'd written back to her about that. She wrote more about what some of her concerns are, which I don't think we need to necessarily share, but I wanted you to be able to see it. So what do you recommend for this 13-year-old boy and this mom who's so concerned about his anxiety?
Yeah, and I noticed that, I just looked at the email, and I think this is someone in England.
Ireland.
Ireland,
and
yeah. So I don't know what the laws are in Ireland in regards to school attendance. But the first thing, when I read the situation, the very first thing, because she says, what else can I do? I would pull my child out of school immediately. Like, there's no way that I would expose my child to this, because what is the downside? Like, short of someone coming and arresting me for truancy, I would pull my child out, because he's not going to, it's not worth it. The stress and anxiety that he's going through, the fear that is developing, it doesn't balance out with gains. I don't know, first of all, that he's gaining anything. Even if he was gaining, I don't know that it's worth this anxiety. So I would pull him out until the district found me a better placement.
There you go.
That's what I would do. I mean, it's just ridiculous. And so I've been to some classes that are like this, and believe me, it causes stress and anxiety for us. Like, forget about a child who might be also sensitive in terms of hearing or sound, or just fearful if there are other children who are aggressive or doing challenging screaming. I mean, imagine being in a classroom where there are other children who are completely out of control, screaming, perhaps the noise level, the activity level, it's just fear-evoking.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely. And I think it's so difficult for parents to listen to their inner gut sometimes, because one of the things that she did write in the second email, that she described how when she leaves him at school, she feels like she's driving away into the sunset and leaving him in this really horrible environment, and it doesn't sit well with her. And it's so funny, because I know I have had things like that happen as a parent, where I've said, I'm not okay with this. I'm not. But it's so hard to listen to that voice in yourself, because you don't know when are you overreacting.
It's true.
But I love that you wrote in. I love that you heard that from the preeminent expert in autism, that she's saying, no, listen to yourself.
Absolutely.
And don't leave him there.
Undoubtedly. There's just no reason. There's no reason to expose him. I learned this lesson, or a much milder version of this lesson, many, many years ago. I had a child in school, and he was doing pretty well. He enjoyed school, actually. Because he was very smart and he enjoyed learning, but he had started to develop a pretty significant phobia about going from class to class, like moving in between. And we discovered that it had to do with the buzzer, the time, the buzzer that indicates that it's the end of a class session. And it was so horrific for him that about 15 minutes prior to the buzzer, he would just completely start panicking. Like, we're talking panic. And it's just, we ended up actually giving him headphones, and he was fine. But the issue is that, why force a child? Like, at first we tried to acclimate him to the sound, and we were like, this is too much for him. Why force this child and we're trying to give him worry plaques and feeling journal, but a worry plaque and a feeling journal they're objects that have no value unless they gain some sense of peace, right? So he could write forever, but it's not going to help him avoid that anxiety-provoking situation. Or he could tell you that he's worried. It's not going to help him. The bottom line is, he's going into, sort of from his perspective maybe, it's like entering a war zone. So take him out.
There you go.
Take him out and have the school provide you with a better environment for him. Sometimes it's not about modifying the child's abilities, it's about modifying the environment
There we go.
sometimes.
Now, when he comes home, and she's probably going to have to homeschool for a little while they find a placement, what kinds of things could she be doing to work on the anxiety there?
I think that probably the anxiety would not occur there, but would occur when you find another placement.
Okay.
So what'll probably happen is that you won't be dealing with this sort of stuff at home because it sounds like it's more school-based. If it is home-based, then please let us know and we'll address that. But what'll happen is when you start to go back to a new school, he won't trust anyone because he'll think you're going to a bad environment. And what I would do in that case is I would stay with him for a little while until he realizes that, I'd fade myself out gradually, until he realizes that the new school environment is not the same as the old one. It's a much easier type of environment. That's all. I mean, like, you know, our children react normally. There's nothing about we have to listen to their reactions. That's a very normal reaction. Any child would be upset if they're in a classroom where people are out of control.
Yeah. It's one of the reasons why it so concerns me that a lot of times schools will say, well, we need to put all the kids with autism and everything else together.
That's right.
You know, we're going to segregate them all together, put them in some place. And for a lot of our kids who are sensory sensitive, you know, being with somebody sitting next to somebody who does this is enough to put them into a place where they want to crawl into a ball. It doesn't necessarily work putting them together.
Absolutely.
I don't know who came up with that great idea. Let's put them all together.
Exactly. It's completely like counterintuitive. The other, even if they're not sensory sensitive, someone who sits next to you and does this all day is distracting.
Yeah.
So, you know, not the fault of the child who's doing this, but the bottom line is that is why ABA is and has always been one-to-one. So the concept has to be that for a child with autism, so forget about everybody else, but that child who's hand flapping needs a one-to-one, and they need a different environment altogether, because believe me, even that child who's hand flapping is going to be distracted and upset when there's another child screaming, and the child who's screaming is going to be distracted and upset by the child who's they're all going to cause chaos, and you know, with each other's sensory abilities or sensitivities, and distracted. And so the whole purpose of going to school is to learn. Like, you are not going to be learning. I mean, you know, it's not a camp where we throw our kids in and hope that someone's going to take care of them. That's not going to happen.
When our son was first diagnosed with autism, he was 2.5, and California offered us this sort of floor time-esque thing. And we went and were doing it, and everybody had said how, you know, how great it was and how it's kid-driven and all.
Oh, the school staff.
Well, the people at the regional center were like, oh, you're going to love this, you're going to love this. So we took Jem, and we had such high hopes. He had stopped speaking, and we thought, this is something. We're going to get something. And it was a nightmare for him. It was an absolute nightmare for him. They would let the kids run around in this play gym for a little while, and always what would happen, Jem wouldn't play with anybody else, but at some point he made a lot of noises. He would go, he would grunt, and then one little girl would scream and go, monster, and then Jem thought it was great. He would chase after the kids while they would yell monster.
Oh my
I was horrified, and they thought it was great because he's interacting, and I was like, interacting? The other kids, these are kids with autism and Down syndrome and other developmental things, and they were screaming and running away from him. So this was horrifying. Then they would take him into a room that they would call the music room, and they had all the primary plastic colored chairs and they would sit there and they would put on this recording of somebody singing this, you know, different ABC song, and then the teacher would sit in front of them, and she would have all these little, they would, you know, A is for apple, and she would sign apple, and all the other kids sat there in the circle, and they would sign these things, and Jem would scream and run for the door. And now the kids had behaviors going on while they were singing, but he would scream and run for the door, and like he was in pain, he would scream. And if you tried to bring him back, he'd claw and bite and kick. He did not want to be in there. And every day was a nightmare. Every single time my husband, they showed us how to hold him in a basket hold. So we would have him in a basket hold while the other kids were doing it. Then they said, well, we just need to put him in a weighted vest. So he was in a weighted vest and we were doing the basket hold and he'd scream and claw. I had claw marks on my neck where he would try to get out, right? And then they said, well, we'll put him in a 5-point harness therapy chair. So he was in the weighted vest, in the five, and we would have our arms around him past that because he would tip the chair over, get it on its side, and be clawing and kicking his way out. So then they said, let's put a weighted blanket over. And I said, why don't you just staple him to the floor?
That's crazy.
Right? It was horrifying. But we would be, and this would last like 40 minutes, and then they would have a craft and a snack. And I would always come out of there crying and the other parents looking at us. And eventually the other parents asked that we be taken out of the group because he was so disruptive, right? But then before we got to that, though, it was spring break. And one of the other little boys had an older brother who was 5 in typical kindergarten. And he came to be, because, you know, what was she going to do? Leave him at home? It was spring break. And he came in and sat down in a chair. And no behaviors. And so Jem took one look at him and went over and sat down right next to him and was like looking at what he was doing. And the other boy had his hands like on his knees. And so Jem put his hands on his knees and was watching. And Jem sat there and signed through the whole thing, like a magic trick. And I said, what just happened? And it was because he had someone to model that wasn't having a whole lot of other stuff to deal with. Yeah. And that's when I went, oh, no. And went on the look for other things and eventually miraculously found Card through really cool.
How long did this go on? Like, how long was this process?
So we started in January and they had us in this process until June. And then right after his birthday, his 3rd birthday, we started with Card.
That's amazing.
And he had not... nothing, no gains in that 6 months, but I was beaten and bruised.
Unbelievable.
And then we started with Card, and it was miraculous. It was
the change.
Oh, and the change, I mean, what happened in that first year, I've written blogs about it, about what a difference a year can make. School, by the way, wanted him to go to school. And when they showed us the IEP, what they wanted to do in that year, the one thing that he could do was that he could sort the little colored bears by colors. That's what he could do. And his whole IEP was about that he would be able to sort in colors. And I said to them, there's nothing on here that he's going to gain. Where are the things? And they said, well, he's not capable of doing these things in a group sitting. When he's with other kids, he screams. And so we have to work on getting him to be able to do what he already knows. And I said, so you're going to torture him for a year? Yeah. And that's what you're going to do? And we fought. We fought hard. I mean, I told you last week, they sued us. Because I said, we're not doing that. We want him to grow and progress. And we fought for and were able to do a 40-hour in-home program because that was all you had back then. 40 hours of Card in the home. I now know what we could have accomplished in that year if we'd had the center, that we could have gotten even more. But, you know, what we got done was miraculous.
Yeah, that's incredible. What
a year later, they had someone who didn't know him evaluate him after a year of Card. So she didn't look at the previous report, and she offered him full inclusion, and he was included ever after that. After 1 year of intensive Card, he didn't scream when he was around other kids after that. He loved being around other kids.
You just gave me goosebumps. Like I'm horrified. You know, like the stories you were saying about, like, you know, like putting him in a harness and all that sort of stuff. It just horrifies me that this sort of stuff would have happened just a few years ago. Like, I remember going to court for a family, because all the 90s was just about going to court. Like, I was an expert witness every week. And so I remember going to court for a family where the child had been kind of like strapped down in order to be taught. And I remember thinking, like, this is so barbaric. Like, how does this even happen in this century? And to hear that 20 years fast forward, it still is happening is just crazy to me.
And to my kid, who, you know, is doing amazing things now.
Who's like such an intelligent kid, unbelievable.
And as a teacher, I kept saying, it seems like there's something else going on. Why aren't we addressing that?
Yes.
Because he's not going to learn until we get that under control. But when I saw him sit next to that kid who was not having all these issues, man, that was it for me. I was like, oh, you know, I'm not putting him in a room where he has, because whatever, you know, and we hadn't really been paying attention to how much noise, because there was more noise coming out of my kid than out of anybody else.
Yes.
So that's all I was focused on.
Of course.
But then to sit back and go, this is a chaotic thing. These kids had things going on.
Yes.
No wonder why he's screaming and in pain and whatever. Anyway, we should take a break, and then maybe we can come back and answer this question about my son is recovering from ASD.
Yeah.
And you use the word cure. It's incendiary. So we'll address that in just a second. So stick with us. We'll be right back after these messages.
Hey, I'm Candace Cameron Bray.
Tom Bergeron.
You're watching Autism Live.
And you're watching Autism Live.
And you're watching Autism Live.
You're watching Autism Live.
Do you provide care services to someone with autism? Recently, more and more children are being diagnosed with the condition and getting the support they need as awareness grows. But what happens to these children as they grow up? It's estimated that over 500,000 youth with autism will turn 18 in the next decade, and they'll be faced with a very difficult reality. As children with autism grow up, their services start to disappear or become very difficult to access. Things like medical care, mental health counseling, vocational training, and more. All services that are still desperately needed. The loss of support that youth with autism face as they grow up is so severe that it's referred to in the autism community as falling off a cliff. Adults with autism need the same level of support they had as children to avoid falling off the services cliff. Introducing Skills Living, the web-based software designed specifically to help transitioning youth and adults with autism so they can avoid the cliff and instead fly to success. With Skills Living, help your learner with autism develop the skills they need in all the critical areas of adult life, including self-control, planning, and problem-solving, effective communication, performing life skill tasks for independent living, acquiring and maintaining employment or other meaningful activities, developing and maintaining social skills and relationships, accessing transportation and public services, and being safe. Skills Living includes a comprehensive assessment, a data collection mobile app, behavior intervention plan builder, and automatic progress reporting. It also provides a complete curriculum addressing 16 key areas spanning the entire range of functioning adulthood. Skills Living is easy to use and can be implemented by schools, parents, and autism service providers. Call or click today for your free demo and see how Skills Living can help your learner with autism avoid the cliff and instead reach their fullest potential. Skills Living. Wish, learn, become.
Parent-to-parent token economies are a great way to get to good behavior with your child. So first of all, let's talk about what is a token economy. It's just a visual representation of reinforcement or a reward that's going to come later on for behavior that you've done now. So I've got a couple examples here of token economies that I want to show you. But one of the most important things to remember with a token economy is that it's essential that whatever the child is working for be meaningful to them. So here, this is a two-part token economy. I've got a list of things for the child to pick from, to pick what they want to work for. So the child would pick off the one they want, put it on their other token economy, and you can see it says, I'm working for a play date. What a great thing to work for. And as this child progresses through their day at school, every time they do a task and they do a good job, they're going to get a token to put on this token economy. And we've got a rule in place for them that says maybe you have to get 3 tokens in order to get that reward, which today is a play date. And as the child gets better, we're going to make it harder and harder. Maybe next week it's going to be 4 tokens to get the play date. This is another token economy here. This is a task completion token economy, so every time the child completes a task that there's a picture of,
They can peel off a token and put it on to demonstrate that they have completed that task. Again, it's essential that they get a really wonderful, meaningful reward for having gotten these tokens. Using a token economy can be much simpler than this too, because you can download them to put a free app on any one of your devices. Right here on my phone, I've got a free app, Easy Kid Tokens, and when my child does a task and completes it, and he can specify what the stickers are. In this case, it is a ladybug, and when he gets 3 of them, then he's going to get his reward. This is a really simple way to take something with you when you're going on an outing and make sure that your child is staying on task and getting rewarded for the things that they do. It leads to good behavior. One of the most frightening things there is when your child wanders away or elopes. Welcome back to Autism Live and to Ask Dr. Doreen. We're here with Dr. Doreen Grant-Pichet, and she's answering your questions in real time. And we had a question that I teased before that somebody wrote in and said, you say your son is recovering from ASD, and are you saying that there is a cure? First of all, you must have read that on our website, because it was part of my bio on the old website, that there's been such a, I don't know, an arc. When our son was first diagnosed, we were using the word autistic. So we were saying to people, he's autistic. And I have to tell you, it didn't feel right. And I said to my husband, this doesn't feel right. Then we happened to turn on Oprah one day, and Holly Robinson Peete and Jenny McCarthy were on the show talking about their children with autism. So eye-opening to me, right? And Holly Robinson Peete said, you know, we don't use the word autistic referring to our son because you know, when somebody has cerebral palsy, you don't call them palsic. You don't, you know, you don't define them by the things. So she said, we say he has autism. But it wasn't autism spectrum disorder back then. It was just autism. We say he has autism. And I said to Jim, my husband, I said, you know, I like that better. You know, he is not autism. He is separate in my mind. That at the time I said he's separate from autism, so we're going to say he has autism. Then we started at CARD, and I said it doesn't fit anymore. It doesn't fit. It's not the hopeful that I want to be. And we started saying that he's actively recovering from autism. That became the thing that we said all the time. Well, now my son is 15, and he gets to pick and choose some of the words that are used. And I find it interesting because I always ask him, how do you want me to say this? What do you want me to say? And his thing is, I don't have a problem if you say to people that I was diagnosed with autism at 2.5. And he goes, but that should be the end of the discussion.
Yeah, I love that. Because
he does not identify himself as being on the autism spectrum.
No, and he isn't. I mean, and that is the big thing that people need to realize. So, are you ready for a long discussion?
To wrap in.
I just always
right, and look, spoiler alert here. Somebody's going to be offended, right?
I hope not. I mean, I'm going to be very scientific and neutral about this. So, so let's just there's the emotional side of it. So I have so many things to say about this, but let me just start with the very important portion of it, and then I'll put my own feelings on it as well. So let's say I'm trying to think of another disorder that we could talk, another mental disorder that we let's say dysgraphia or whatever, any kind of disorder that has it's defined by a series of symptoms, right? So we'll say, you know, obsessive compulsive disorder. That's a good one. Everybody knows about OCD. An obsessive compulsive disorder has a series of symptoms, right? And you diagnose someone not by saying, you know, oh, he seems to have it or he was born with it or something like that, but you will sit with the patient and you'll observe and you'll ask questions and you'll identify symptoms that are causing such a problem for the individual that the individual is there to seek help. And the symptoms are, you know, with OCD, there are things like repetitive compulsive behaviors and et cetera, anxiety about a certain thing and so on. And you list these symptoms, right? And you write, oh, he has this, and it's severe enough that it's causing him distress, et cetera, et cetera. And you list them, and if there's, let's say, 5, and the symptom requirements in the diagnostic manual are 6, you don't get that diagnosis. It's just very simple. If they're 5 and they're not severe enough, you're not going to get the diagnosis. Now, go ahead.
I was just going to say, so they wouldn't say that you're OCD because that's obsessive compulsive disorder. But what would you say if you had 4 and it needed 5? What would you say? That you have some elements of OCD, or how would you language it?
It wouldn't be necessary to say that. You would express the symptoms that you have.
Okay, so you have anxiety.
You would say this individual has a certain amount of, is anxious about things.
Okay.
You can't even say they have anxiety, because anxiety is a disorder.
Okay.
You would say they have anxiety about certain things.
Okay.
Or there are some compulsive behaviors present. They're just not enough to classify for that diagnosis.
Disorder.
So now let's talk about autism,
Okay.
right? So autism has a series of symptoms that must be present in order for you to get that diagnosis. So in the old days, it was very interesting because you would have you had 3 sets, right, of behaviors. You had, and when I say old days, I'm talking about prior to 2013, you know, or 2015.
Way back, yeah.
Way back. If I want to really go way back, like we're talking DSM-3, that was a whole different set of diagnostic criteria. That's the one I originally trained on. And it's like 16 different symptoms that had to be present. Then DSM-4 changed that to 3 sets. And within each set, you had to have like 2 or 3 symptoms present. They just kind of subdivided it. And it was an interesting era, because sometimes you'd see kids and they would have enough symptoms in sections 1 and 2, which was communication and social, but not in section 3, which was self-stimulatory repetitive behaviors. And the same thing holds true today. So you look at a child right now that those domains dropped into 2, right? And it became social communication, and the other one is sort of the repetitive areas, or it's not really repetitive because it also includes sensory in there. But nevertheless, you still need to have all of these and a few of these. And if you don't, I'm not going to be able to give you a diagnosis at all. Now, there's enough now where most of the time when I see a child, you will fit to some extent, but now I have the ability to also give you a severity level, which essentially means like you could have a child who is extremely mild on the spectrum and they need a little bit of help. And you have a child who's very severe and they need a lot of help. And also I can say they really need a lot of help in the social communication area, but they don't have a lot of self-stimulatory, so they don't need a lot of help in that area. You know, so we have options now.
Yeah.
But having said that, if I have a child, even right now, who, let's say, and I'm now going to describe, and maybe you'll recognize this, who, let's say, prefers to have less active social life, so like more of a one-on-one friendships rather than, is not the social butterfly type, right? You know, all of my kids, right? So I'm kind of like not Nikki, not Charlie, but more Nikki, right?
Okay.
They're very different.
Right.
So there's a child who's less, like their friendships are much more one-on-one rather than group. Let's say it's a child who prefers to read alone rather than go out and party with friends. It's an individual who maybe even doesn't really enjoy noisy environments, has problems with noisy environments, so will avoid noisy environments. Let's say they are also disturbed by chaos and intensive lights, and maybe going into chaotic environments like the previous one we're discussing will cause anxiety for this individual, and all of those types of things, right? So maybe they're not even, because they've been isolated or not in social environments their whole life, they might not read social nuances just as well as other people. But you know what? I'm sorry, even with all of that, they just will not get the diagnosis because they don't have enough of the symptoms. So Jem, as an example, just doesn't have enough of the symptoms. He just doesn't. He may still struggle with certain environments, but there is no way on earth anyone would ever diagnose him on this spectrum, ever, right now. So the difficulties that he himself, and I don't know if he does or doesn't have, but any child might still have a couple of areas where they need assistance. That's normal.
Yeah.
It's like any other child. Like any child who never received a diagnosis might come and say, you know what, I have a really hard time in a classroom that's really noisy. I can't focus on this. Or I don't really know what my friends mean when they say these types of things. Or like they could have individual symptoms, right? But that we also include or not, but they have nothing really to do with autism. So when you have a child, when I get a child and I am, they start out with all 20 symptoms, and over the course of intervention, they no longer have enough symptoms to be diagnosed. They're done with this diagnosis. Now you can call it whatever is less offensive, because I am not a parent. I don't know what terminology is offensive or isn't. But to me, it's just the same as saying someone might have chickenpox and they'll have scars left from the chickenpox, but they no longer have chickenpox. It is over for them. They don't struggle with it anymore. It is not something that I can say they have actively. And it's the same thing. You could say it's autism in remission if that's how you feel more comfortable. But the bottom line is, if a completely neutral psychiatrist, psychologist, diagnostician saw them, they would no longer classify them under that criteria. That's, and I don't, so yes, it is possible to drop the diagnosis. And I refer to that as recovery. There's nothing, there's never has been, ever, in the history of all time, any kind of negative connotation with that. I know that parents sometimes, or even individuals on the spectrum.
I think it's more individuals on the spectrum get upset. Yeah.
They get upset because they feel like we're saying autism is a bad thing and now you have recovered from it.
Yeah.
Well, bottom line is, the truth is, anything that is classified as a disorder, and it means by definition that the symptoms of that thing have made life harder for you, period. If you were in a planet where everyone had the same symptoms, life would not be harder, because all of life would have been modeled to fit individual. But the truth is, life is not modeled for, the world is not modeled for individuals on the spectrum. You will go to places where others expect you to communicate at a certain level. You will go to environments that are harsh for you, sensory-wise. There are a million things that your life becomes more difficult. And when the definition of a disorder, by the way, is anything that prevents you from functioning like others at work, at school, at home.
Yeah.
So, the example that I've always said is like someone could drink a bottle of scotch a day, and as long as they go to work and have a functioning, great work environment, do well at work, and they have a good family life, you cannot be diagnosed with alcohol disorder or even dependence, because you basically are functioning.
Right.
And that's the key issue here. It's that autism is so pervasive that it prevents you from enjoying or being able to, access the various reinforcers in a normal world. And so as a result of that, it is classified as a disorder. Yeah. And so when you no longer struggle with it, in the sense that you do not have enough symptoms that prevent you from functioning and even succeeding in school, with friends, and at home, in a work life, then you don't have it. You don't have a disorder.
I think part of the issue is that, and I love the definition that you just gave, because that's the clinical definition.
Yes.
But emotions always come into it. And there is a culture of autism now, too.
Yes.
And the culture of autism, and the more I meet and talk with adults who are on the autism spectrum, and how they identify with themselves, and how they, in a time when the world did not have a positive outlook on autism, they sort of banded together like,
protection.
Like penguins in a snowstorm. They
Protection.
circled the wagons and they said, we are, Temple calls herself an autistic. Mm-hmm. That's like the oldest generation of people with autism. I am an autistic. That's how much through and through they relate to being autism. Then a little bit older,
it's like saying I'm a woman.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that is how they identify, and they're very protective of it. And they have come to understand that their brains are wired differently.
Correct.
And they are protective of that, and they are angry sometimes when I certainly have suggested also to my son and to other people, well, look, this is the way I need you to do it. And they will say, why? Is that just because you and a bunch of people like you decided? And boy, that's very enlightening to me, because it's like, yeah, why do we do it this way? Because there are more of us than there are of you. But you see that that's changing. That there
definitely
changing. You know, I mean, and the world is changing to be in ways that are more accommodating of that different wiring.
Definitely, no question. But some basic things will never change.
Exactly.
And one of those is language.
Yeah.
We, like humanity, and the whole difference between us and animals is that we communicate. And so being able to communicate appropriately is not going to, it's going to be something that is always a requirement of fitting into the universe, right?
And like I want to say, when you say appropriately, what I hear is effectively.
Effectively, yes, effectively would be the same, I guess. When I say appropriately, I mean, you know, speaking as opposed to hitting.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, you know, one of the difficulties becomes, because there is this feeling of we are autistic and we need to protect that, and all of you are trying to get rid of what we are.
Yes.
And that there is this fear of that by getting rid of the disorder, that you will get rid of, you're changing me and you will get rid of my culture. But the truth is that that individuals with autism are wired differently. And my son is still wired differently. He just doesn't have a disorder. And if we could get all individuals who are wired differently to have all obstacles that are in their way taken out, that difference, we see more and more of it all the time, shines.
But can I just stop for a second?
Yeah.
There is no if. We are all wired differently.
Well, but there is a very specific thing that I think, no.
It's just gradients. It's just levels.
Well, that
We're
makes
completely wired differently. Yeah. Like, you just told me today that you have dizziness.
Oh, yeah.
That's you.
Yeah.
I don't get that.
Yeah.
I have other issues. I have back problems, right? We all have things we struggle with.
Yes.
They're just not so. If I, for instance, let's say mentally, this is from a perspective, like if I had so much anxiety, which by the way is a very common symptom, if I had so much anxiety that it prevented me from doing things, would I band together with other very anxious people and say, leave us alone?
Right.
Or
we're
would I
protecting
say,
this because we're different.
protecting it because it's part of us?
Right.
Or would I say, I need to kind of get over my anxiety so that I can go to work?
Right. Right.
And that's what this is about. This is about.
But it became about the words. I wish we would come up with different words. I wish we would get rid of, just give everybody that feels that way the term autism, and I wish they would come up with a new thing for the autism spectrum disorder. And disassociate autism from disorder.
Yes.
Because they feel that they own that term. I wish we would move another way.
And
because the fact that it's both of them,
right,
it makes it very difficult for people emotionally.
Understood. And I just don't think that there is a way to get away from the word disorder. I think it's important to have the word disorder.
Oh, I think there needs to be
disorder.
But let's take autism
is a
out
bad word.
Let's call it, you know, hedging green syndrome, or hedging green disorder, right? Hedging green disorder, formerly known as autism spectrum disorder, and then we'll talk about autism and all the pluses that autism comes, and not the disorder parts that come with it. That's hedging green.
No, it could be like social communication stereotypical disorder or something.
Oh, I want something out there.
But, so yeah, hedging green, so it doesn't. But the issue, I think, and you know why it's important to have, of course, the term disorder is that it opens the door to a million other things.
You won't get any services.
Support, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. But I mean, honestly, to me, it's just it is important to. Maybe the way to refer to it, instead of like saying recovery or cure or so on, is to say just that it's overcoming the symptoms.
Yeah.
That's really all it is. It's overcoming the symptoms, or it's getting control over the symptoms. However you want to talk, however you want to say it, but it's. The symptoms are what make it debilitating. I always, when I do diagnosis with a parent, I always start by telling them the diagnosis itself doesn't matter at all, should not scare you, because I know that is one of the most scary things, to get a diagnosis. And I tell people, don't think of it that way, because it's completely malleable. It's going to change. You know, and in the old days when we had 3 or 4 different versions of the diagnosis, you'd have a child who would start with autism or autistic disorder, go to, let's say, pervasive developmental disorder, and then go to Asperger's, and then go to ADHD, and like it was, and then nothing, right? Because they were shedding these symptoms as they went along. And so that is kind of how I still see it. I still see it as just a series of issues that we need to work on. Some of these issues are require just intensive tutoring. It's just like someone saying, oh, my math is terrible, I need help with math. Oh, but my, creative writing is so incredible that I could help you, you know?
I have to stop you because we're out of time. I have to let you go.
Sorry.
I'm actually a minute late. So we're going to take a break. We're going to excuse Dr. Grandpichet. I'm going to be back to continue talking about some of the things that you guys wrote in that I can address, not of a clinical nature. And then it's going to be time for Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy, but stick with us.
I can't believe how much I talk about this and I forgot.
Hard times lead to good choices. Many times you're going to find out that change is coming and it's not something that you like to see. Things sometimes just don't work. Sometimes you have to put your child in a new school. Sometimes you have to put them in a different classroom. Often you'll see this with perhaps special education versus regular education, or everyone's favorite, puberty. All bets are off then. However, these things happen when they need to happen. So making that hard choice is super, super scary. But when you open those doors to look at things that maybe you've never dreamed you would have to look at, you're going to find help that you never expected. There are a lot of people out there dealing with the same things that you are dealing with, and there is a level of help that you never even knew existed. So don't be afraid when it's time to look at the scary problems that you're having. When those things come up, when the aggression increases, when things are falling apart at home, when you're getting the calls from the schools, don't be afraid. Reach out. Find out what you need to do. You might need to look at new schools, new housing. You might need to access new levels of service. But I am telling you, you're going to see amazing things. There are children that, as they grow, do things with the help of others, very specialized support, that you never thought they could do. So once you do that and you meet the child where he or she is and you give them what they need, everybody can do better, and you're going to see amazing progress.
Welcome back to Autism Live. We had to end early with Dr. Grandpichet because she had a meeting, but we don't have Nancy yet. I wanted to take just a couple of minutes because we didn't really get to the cure part of the question, the last question. Somebody wrote, you say your son is recovering from ASD. Are you saying that there is a cure? And I just wanted to be clear that here at Autism Live, we don't use the word cure. CARD, the Center for Autism and Related Disorders, uses the term recovery, which is very different from cure. And I think there's a reason why I feel as a parent, why we don't use the word cure, is because, and we don't use the word disease because it doesn't fit with what the term disease means. So I think when you're talking about a disease, that then you can be talking about a cure. And we want to be really careful how we choose our words, since words are so important and they mean so many things to so many people. And we already have enough confusion in the autism community about some people feeling one way about a word and other people feeling other ways. So cure definitely puts a negative connotation on all of autism. If we say that we had to cure it, I can certainly understand why people get uncomfortable with that. And there are people who are very uncomfortable with recovery, with that word, and I've had people refuse to be on the show because we have it on our website and because we talk about it on the show. I've apologized to all of those people and said, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. It is never my intention to offend anyone. or to make them feel less than. Nothing could be further from my desire in anything. But when I ask them what exactly is it about it, what I find is what they are offended by is by the concept, not even just the word recovery, by the concept. And because I've said, pick a different word to discuss for me to use when we're talking about the concept. Give me what word would be okay with you. And in the medical profession now, they do call it remission. That is how they code it in insurance, as they say that someone is in remission. Now, I don't like that at all. To me, that's like, but that's how the medical community, and I've said, what word isn't offensive to you? And what they say to me is, no, it's the concept of it that is offensive to me. And that, I say to everyone, oh, I'm so sorry, because I cannot say that I'm going to stop talking about the concept of recovery, because the concept of recovery is very much there. It's emotional for people because not every person is going to have the opportunity or is going to recover from the disorder of autism. We already know, even if you could give them the very best of everything, and not everyone is going to get to that point where they would no longer be considered having a disorder. And that is what we should be focusing our time and our energy on, is why. Why is it that with a lot of people, some people get funding and some people don't? And why do some people, when they get funding, not get to that point of recovery? And science keeps showing us more and more what are the different aspects of why don't all children recover. CARD, for one, is very much at the forefront of this, trying to figure out how do we get more done. What are the things that are most likely predictive of kids who will do well? We talk about those endlessly on the show. That one of the biggest one is getting the full prescription. That so many of you who are listening and hear the sound of my voice right now have fought for and gotten ABA therapy. So many of you. Not everybody has been able to have achieved that yet, and we keep working on that, right? And I say to anybody out there, when there's a will, there's a way. There are so many more ways than when we started this show to get ABA and to get funding for it. So if you're still in that place, please reach out directly to me, s.penrod@autism-live.com, and let's figure it out. Because everybody deserves this, and where there's a will, there's a way. We can get the funding, or find another way around it. There are tools out there. You can do it yourself, and you can start today. So reach out to me directly, s.penrod@autism-live.com. Thanks, Gabe, for putting it up there. And let's get you figured out with that. But for those of you who got the funding for ABA, if you have a child that is younger than the age of 6, I want you to stop everything for a day and fight to get more hours. And when I tell you that it's like, think of it as your house is on fire, I'm just not kidding. What we see with insurance companies, the studies are in place that show what's effective for 6 and under. They're there. You have everything that you need to fight with your insurance company, and it may take you a year. It may. But that would be a year well spent because you need that funding. We're seeing that more and more insurance funding is drying up, starting at around age 6. Definitely at 8, there's a big cut, and a lot of kids are losing all of their funding by the age of 10. And that's a much harder climb. People are winning still when they're fighting, but it's a much longer, it's a more severe fight. But if you 6 and under, the studies are all there. There's hundreds of them. There's no way. It's unconscionable if they're not giving you the full prescription. Make sure that whoever diagnosed your child gave you a full prescription. It should be between 25 and 40 hours. And if you have a child who is not yet in kindergarten, push for 40. Don't let anybody tell you less than 40. Yep, you have to ramp up to it because a 2-year-old, a 2.5-year-old can't start with 40, but they can ramp up to it. If you start them with 20 and then make it 25, then make it 30, and then the next week 35, they can do 40. And it makes a huge difference, makes a huge, huge difference. But I started all this because we were talking about the word cure and why people get so emotional. On the one hand, we have people who are saying, I'm fine just the way I am. And I want to loudly say, yes, yes, you are. But the double-edged sword of that is that in the same breath they'll say, but why can't I get funding to take this class that I know that would help me with this thing that I need? Well, because we can't argue that you are fine and perfect and that you need help and support in the same place, because politicians and funding sources don't understand the nuances of that. You and I do, but they don't. And I want to send you the message that you are fine and perfect exactly the way you are, but you do need help and support. So that is why we have to be very careful about the words that we choose. And I'll get on the same page and say, you do need help and support. You absolutely do. But there are things to put in place that you could eventually get so much help and support that you wouldn't need the help and support anymore, right? And then what will we say? You can pick the word whatever you want to say, but CARD uses the term recovery. No one here at Autism Live or at CARD uses the word cure. It's not appropriate. It's not a disease. It's a disorder. That's why recovery, remission, I guess those are our options for now. Anyway, write in however you feel about it, because it's a discussion. And I firmly say to people who are on the spectrum, what words would you like to use? Whenever we're here and starting an interview, I say, what words would you like to use? And would you like to use those words yourself? And I say that to my son all the time. All right, I've soapboxed about that enough. We got to take a break. It's time for Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. So watch this break and we'll be back with Nancy. Stick with us.
You say howdy, we say hi. Let's get rowdy, let's get wild. Let's get wild. Let's get wild. Let's get wild. Let's get wild.
Hey, welcome back to Autism Live. We heard you. Everybody wants
macaroni and cheese.
Yeah, but we're going to make it allergy free. But here's what's the crazy part of this macaroni and cheese. It's actually healthy.
And it tastes good.
Yeah, it tastes really good.
That's the most important part.
So we're going to start. We got our water boiling. There's so many variations on the pasta. We're using today a corn pasta. We can verify with the manufacturer that we have a GMO-free product. So let's go ahead and put that in there.
Ooh,
and if you don't mind, stir that up for me, my friend.
Now it's sticking a little bit to the bottom.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
We maybe add a little more high heat oil and spread that around again. One thing you gotta know about gluten-free pasta, if you overcook this, it becomes mush. Let's move this guy over to the other burner so you can see what I'm doing. And now we're gonna start with the old macaroni and cheese sauce. What's great is there's a lot of choices for, you know, different soups. And the way that I look at soups, and again, please follow the recipe on your screen right now. I don't like to measure very often. But what I like to use is a creamy butternut squash soup. So this soup is great because it adds a lot of flavor to the dish, but also gives people another serving of vegetables. With kids, we don't want to over season. Maybe with the adults, we can season some for the kids first, pull it out, serve them, and then add a little more, you know, garlic powder or onion powder or other types of things into your dish. So the next most important thing on this recipe is we're going to add in a thickener and the faux cheese. Now some people like their sauce really thick, so you just add in more cornstarch or more arrowroot, so that's not a big deal. How's that doing? You think it's ready?
I think it's done.
Okay, so why don't we switch? I'll take that, you do that.
Okay.
And I'm going to strain this bad boy here. Here, let me turn that off.
Okay.
Or we're going to cause trouble again.
Trouble in Lisa's kitchen.
No,
that's another show.
Don't, yeah, right? So I'm going to go ahead and get this all strained. It's a good consistency. So I'm going to check to make sure our pasta is cooked. So really you just want to make sure, just like any pasta, it's a little bit squeezy, a little bit. Nice. Dude, good job.
Hey.
We're good.
Looks yummy.
So even though the cheese is not totally melted, it's okay. Don't panic. What's important is that you're going to love this recipe once you eat it. What I enjoy most about this recipe is that it smells good, but this stuff is amazing. So if you don't mind, I'm going to serve you some up, and you can maybe blow a little bit on it so you don't burn your mouth. Sorry, I'm once a mom, always a mom.
Just like we tell our kids.
I know, right?
But I can't wait. I'm excited.
So I'm going to give a shot of this too. But
Oh my gosh, that is so good.
this is the ultimate comfort food. So
Oh, it's so
isn't
good.
it good?
And I'm not just saying that. It is really good. It literally tastes like something our kids would really like. And that sweetness is really, really, really good.
So the bonus for us is that when we're serving this to our kids, they're actually getting a full serving of vegetables in this. So instead of just eating a bunch of carbs and worthless calories, you're actually getting some good stuff in this. And we'll be back next time. I hope you join us again here on Autism Live. We're really loving the feedback, and if you have additional feedback, here's how you get it to us. You can send it to us via email at autismlive@gmail.com. On Facebook, facebook.com/autismlive. And also there's thousands of recipes waiting for you to discover them with pictures and different things on the Taka website. So you can hit Taka on the web, takanow.org, and we'll be back. Hopefully we'll get to do this again.
I had so much fun.
Maybe we'll have a little wine, but you got to join us next time. We'll look forward to seeing you then.
Bye guys, we're gonna keep eating.
You say howdy, we say hi. Let's get rowdy, let's get wild. Let's get wild.
Welcome back.
Hi.
And welcome. I was waiting for you to start, and then it was on me. And I'm dizzy today, so we were talking about this earlier.
That's right.
So forgive me for not knowing which way is up.
Good morning and welcome to Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. I'm Nancy Alspaugh-Jackson.
And I'm dizzy Shannon Penrod.
I know, we hope that you're going to be better.
Well, I'm dizzy all the time. Somebody was saying something about dizzy the other day, and I was like, yeah, but I'm dizzy all the time. Like,
Really?
pretty much all the time. And because they were talking about going on some ride at something, I was like, oh, yeah, no, I can't do that. I'm dizzy all the time.
Right.
But then I have, in the spring and in the fall, sometimes I have like intense dizzy that comes.
Okay.
And today I'm intense dizzy.
All right.
It's not fun.
No, that's not fun. Is it vertigo?
Well, it's funny because I've been through, since I was a teenager, I've been through so many tests. Somebody, when I was a teenager, said that I had vertigo, but then, and I think stress and not getting enough rest exacerbates it.
Of course it does.
And probably too much salt intake. See me telling on myself now, all these things that probably add into it. But after Jem was diagnosed, I started having bouts of them again. And it could be partially hormonal, because after having a child, that had changed too. But so then another doctor said I had Meniere's. Somebody else has said it's benign positional vertigo, where the crystals, I don't know.
It's a drag to put up with.
It's a big old drag. And I was never somebody who you could put on a carousel ever in my life. That wasn't,
okay.
I go to Disneyland and I ride the bench most of the time and bring my book and I sit there and do whatever while my family is on rides. There are a couple of rides. I can go on the Peter Pan ride, but that's about it for me, right? That's about, I can't do the carousel.
You're not doing roller coasters.
Oh, somebody said to me, but you can, the other day they said, oh, but you can do like, what's the one mountain? And I was like, are you out of your mind? I got to take stuff to ride the tram.
I get dizzy on rides too. And we were recently at a festival in Hidden Hills, California, where they have a carnival. And Wyatt loves to do that one that tilts around. He craves it. Well,
they say that there's a spectrum of your inner ear and how well you like to be in different positions and so on and so forth. And for some of us, our inner ear is so overactive that, if you were to spin me a little bit in this chair, I would be like, ooh, but our kids on the spectrum, they say a lot of times their inner ear is underreactive. So I don't know if you remember, there was a big phase right around when our kids were being diagnosed in the astronaut training.
Right.
Did they ever do that with Wyatt?
No.
They take a turntable. A lot of OTs were doing this, and I think they still are doing it. So they take a turntable and they set the kid on it, and there were like these 10 positions. So first they had to sit, and they would turn them 10 spins to the right and then 10 spins to the left. Then they would have them lay on their left side, 10 spins to the right, 10 spins. It's making me dizzy thinking about it. And then they had to lay on their back, and then I think they had to lay on their belly. And it was amazing because after they would do this with some kids, they would speak.
Really?
They would speak. Kids that weren't speaking would speak. I saw it with my very own eyes. And a kid who was saying one word would sometimes say a full sentence. And it was a very interesting thing. And one of the things that Card had said to us, Jem was very reactive and would talk better after he would be spun. So we had a turntable for a while, but I also would stick him in an office chair and I would spin him.
Really?
And he loved it, man. He just thought it was the greatest thing. But one of the things that Card said to us as a reinforcer was take him to Disneyland. And because we noticed that every time we would take him to Disneyland, he, for like 2 days after, would be more interactive and he would talk more. And we would always take him on the teacups.
Right.
And he loved the teacups. I can't even
the
watch the
teacups,
teacups.
right.
I'm like holding on to things. So there is something about it that, you know, it wakes up a part of their brain that is not as, that's got a little bit of a snooze button maybe on it, where other people it's a little hyperactive. So, you know, there we go.
Well, in the news today we have a story about the brain.
Yeah.
In autism brains, neurons may take up more space than usual.
Don't you find that interesting?
Yes. People with autism have more gray matter, and which is what neuronal matter is, in their brains overall than their typical peers do. The unpublished findings are based on a brain scans from 211 people with autism, a large sample size for of this kind.
And this was presented just the other day at the 2018 Society of Neuroscience annual meeting in San Diego. And, you know, years ago, I can remember they were starting to do MRIs on kids with brains that had autism. And they were saying that little kids, that their brains, we talked about this last week, their brains grew faster. And they were trying to figure out what it is. Of course, we've had people on the show talk about that it's an autoimmune response potentially. It partially explains why more boys than girls, because there's a cascade effect that happens with one of the hormones that leads to the brain growing faster. But very, very interesting about it taking up more space, because it would, because it's bigger, right? But it's gray matter. And we were talking last week about the fact that I remember somebody describing it to me and saying, so it grows so fast it doesn't have time to make all the connections. So it's like having long distance telephone service without having local service, which I found really a great analogy when Jem was growing up. But so a great thing for us to be able to say that our kids have bigger brains. So there to everybody else, right? And then did you get a chance to vote yesterday?
Of course I did.
Well, not of course. I have to say that there were several people that I talked to on Monday and Sunday, and then a little bit yesterday, that I was saying to everybody, you're going to vote, right?
I sent my ballot in by mail.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
See, and I like to go, but I think after this last time, I was like, you know, I need to rethink this a little bit, because I saw things happen to people and they weren't able to vote, and it was driving me crazy. Well, for instance, this was interesting. My sister ended up being in the hospital, and I was like, are you going to get to vote? And she said, I don't know. And I thought, well, there's a good reason to put your ballot in early, but she did get to vote. She told her nurse and she said, I want to vote, and her precinct brought a ballot to her and she voted from the hospital bed. Yeah, which I didn't know you could do that. But I would bet that there are people in the hospital who don't know that you can ask for that.
Right, I'm sure.
But apparently you can. But there were people who had to travel, and they were like, yeah, I didn't know I was traveling, and now so I can definitely see the benefit. Once I voted by mail when I was in college. I always just feel like, well, where does that go? And do they really open it? And does it get counted? And I like to go, and I always take Jem with me. From the time he was little and in his little carrying case, I've brought him every single time I have voted. And yesterday was no exception, but we had to be there at 7 o'clock when they opened because our lives were busy yesterday. And he was not happy with me, can I tell you, that I dragged him out of bed to go stand there and watch me vote. But I said to him...
He understands all about voting, though.
He does. He did not, for instance, we had so many propositions, and he knew some of them, but he didn't know all of them. Yeah, well, I mean, if you watch any TV at all, they bombarded you with them this year. But we have talked about voting literally since he was in the carrier, and he knows that I have just been adamant from the time he was little that it is his responsibility. So of course it's implied to him that it's his right. But this has come up a lot in this last week about people on the autism spectrum and do they have the right to vote. And I see that more and more people are taking the initiative, and there are different laws in different places that talk about what intellectual level you need to be able to vote. But it's getting wider in more and more places. But there's a great story this morning, it was out yesterday, about a mom who wanted her son to vote. And he is 28 years old on the autism spectrum. And so she wrote him essentially a social story about, it's an instruction manual about
how to vote.
And that voting is important and that he's expected to do it. They noted in the story, and this was covered by CNN, which I appreciate, they noted that if he lived someplace else that he may not have been able to vote, but where he lives, he was able to vote. And that he and he read the story every day, that his parents read it to him, that some of the people that work with him read him the story every day. I think she's got to publish it.
I think she is publishing it.
Because I think
I read that.
She needs to be able to give that to the community. But I love it because it goes hand in hand with what we've been doing. I mean, there are still things, because we were at a different precinct yesterday because we moved than we've ever been before. And I was like, I don't really know how this works here. And we stood in the line, and then they came and said to us, well, do you have a green ballot or a yellow ballot? And I was like, I don't know. How would I know that? Well, it's written on your booklet. Oh, well, I have a green ballot, you know? And, well, then you need to stand in this line. Well, I've never done that before. I've never had a green and a yellow. Sometimes in this world, we just, like, people take... it's as if they take it for granted that everybody knows how to do everything, right? I always get angry when I go into a restaurant and it's a fast food place and it has no clearly defined signs about stand here and order here and pick up your food here, and so you get in the wrong lane and everybody looks at you like you're completely from another planet. How would you know? Makes me mad. But in any case, so Jem got to see his mother and his father stumble through not knowing the difference between a green ballot and a yellow ballot. Honestly. and then, of course, because we had just moved and we made the decision that my husband was going to write in to get his voter registration and I was going to do it online and we were going to see how it worked. Well, his went in, mine did not, but I was able to keep pursuing it on the phone and online. I had to register 4 times.
Did you really?
4 times because it wasn't taking it online. But I persevered. And I kept calling them back and saying, am I there, am I there, am I there? And so I was. So we weren't in the actual, where they, where it's printed already. I was on the blue paper, which was the one that was done last week, but my husband was not. He had to vote provisionally. So it's provisional, but it was great because Jem got to see what that is. And that nobody lost it. Nobody was like, I get to vote, it's my right. My husband voted provisionally. It looked a lot like, but it had, paper attached to it. Then he came with me to the booth. And he's watched me a million times stick the thing in. And every time I say, this is not how it is in every state. In New York, you have to pull the little lever that closes the curtain, and then you flick the levers. But in California, you have the little ink thing, and you have to do the dots. And we talk about the fact that it's not the same every place. And he was so funny because he was like, Mom, I know. And I had my little booklet because I do my booklet ahead of time because otherwise I don't know how you do it. It would take you hours, right? But and I was telling him as I was doing it, look, I'm checking the numbers as I do it because sometimes the ballots are wrong. One of our viewers had written in and said the numbers didn't match up with what was in her booklet. And I said, you got to check that. And then when you pull it out, you got to see that it actually inked, no hanging chads, right? We talk about that. We did all, but so at one point, and he was like, too cool for school and acting like he didn't care. And at one point he said, oh, would you like me to mark it for you? Like, because it looked like it was fun. And I said, unfortunately, that part you can't do.
Right.
You can stand here, but nobody can mark my ballot for me. Unless I physically can't do it.
Right.
And I think he was a little bummed. I think he was like, I can't wait to do this, and I can't wait till the first time he votes. So anyway, so with Wyatt, do you guys ever talk about voting?
Yeah, we talk about voting and how important it is.
And so is he, because he's about to turn 17 in a couple of days. So you're just like a year away.
Right.
He might, no, he'll just miss next year's. So it'll be the year after that he gets to vote. But that's kind of exciting. Do you think he'll be excited about it?
I think so.
Yeah. I think it's a powerful thing, and I love the fact, I love moms who, you know, I mean, like you writing about, you wrote the Sammy stories with Wyatt.
About, so he wouldn't elope.
Yeah, I think when moms do things like this, it just warms my heart. You make it fit for your kid, but you can check it out on CNN if you want to, and they show a picture of the book, but we think that she's going to be publishing, so you can buy it at your local bookstore. So we have a great guest today. Vince Redmond is going to be with us in just a second, and he, as many of you probably already know, is a licensed marriage and family therapist. Vince worked for years, decades, I believe, as a behavior intervention therapist. So he knows the value of therapy and what the steps are that you have to go through as a family and how overwhelming it can be. Both Nancy and I can testify in front of a congressional Senate hearing about how difficult it is. And I love the fact that now Vince's role has changed, and he's a licensed marriage and family therapist and can help families to deal with some of the anxiety and the stress and the what do I do now that comes with having a child on the spectrum. I've shared before that a million years ago, I was like, I can't do this. I don't know how to do this. And went to a therapist. Somebody said, well, you got to get help. Go to a therapist. And I went to the therapist and was describing all the things that were making me anxious. And she said, oh, well, you got to stop that ABA thing. That's clearly the thing that's making you anxious. You have to be here and do that and find the funding, and you should stop that immediately. And I was like, what?
It's a good thing you didn't listen to her, huh?
Well, can you imagine? You know,
from her perspective, that was what was your issue.
Okay, but I have a friend right now whose 2-year-old son has been diagnosed with a very extremely aggressive form of cancer.
Oh, really?
And this 2-year-old is going through chemotherapy, and it's just and
That's gotta
radiation.
Be heartbreaking.
Oh my gosh, it is so. And I see the stress that she and her husband are under, and it's financial stress and it's personal stress. But I don't see anybody walking up to her and saying, "Well, you should just stop trying to get him better." Yeah, like nobody's saying, like everybody's just trying to help her to get through it.
Right.
And I wish. We just did a big long talk about, you know, not wanting to put a negative stigma on autism, but, you know, it is a disorder, and there is a thing that you have to go through to be able to help people, and that is stressful. And I wish people would get on board and offer help and support to families the way I see people stepping up for this friend of ours. It's just remarkable how people are stepping up. It gives me faith in the world, how people are stepping up to support her, because everybody gets it. This
and people
is a child.
Don't step up in the same way for autism.
Well, I think
ABA therapy.
Well, no, and even the therapist saying to me, "Well, you should stop that." That's seems like that's stressful. I think that's just unawareness. But how lucky are we that we have Vince, and Vince totally gets that and would never ever say that to a family. I think it's the beginning of that good place that we want to get to with autism, where you get the support you need for the thing that you're actually trying to do, not the unhelpful thing.
Right.
My mother was always somebody who, you know, I remember going off to college and everything was fine, but, you know, one day it wasn't, and I called home and I was like, well, this happened, and you should come home right now. Was your mom like that? My mother was like, you should come, pack your bags, I'll go to the bus station and pick you up. You should come home. And I go, Mom, no, I don't want to come home. I just want to complain about something that happened. Well, you should come home right now. Not helpful. Not helpful. Was your mom that way?
No, not really.
But you were so independent so early on.
I was pretty independent early on.
My mom, if she were alive, would probably say, I did that so that you would say, well, I don't want to come home. That was probably the way she got me to stay at college.
Psychology.
Yes. Anyway, I digress. We should take a break and get Vince
come back
on.
and get Vince
All right.
on the phone.
So Vince Redmond after these messages. Stick with us.
Hey, I'm Candace Cameron Bray.
Tom Bergeron.
You're watching Autism Live.
And you're watching Autism Live.
And you're watching Autism Live.
You're watching Autism Live.
You say howdy, we say hi. Let's get rowdy, let's get wild. 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 Let's get wild.
Hi, you're back at Autism Live. I'm Lisa Ackerman, and you're at the Allergy-Friendly Cooking Show. And we have kind of an interesting surprise. I brought my sister. That's surprise number one.
Yeah. The fact that I came is surprise number
I know,
two.
right?
Hi, Jamie. Hi.
And we're doing one of my favorite recipes, an ode to Sue, a Taka super mom. She created a kid-friendly sushi recipe for her son, Zach. So hi, Zach. Thanks for allowing us to borrow your lunch recipe because it's really awesome. So we can't wait to show it to you. First, what I'm going to do is we're going to cut up some of these things so we can get ready. I'm going to take an organic cucumber and just make some slices of this that we're going to use in a little bit to add some extra textures to the seaweed roll that we're going to do. And I'm just making long slices so we can place this in our sushi later on. And then I got, of course, a nitrate-free, gluten-free, fantastic sausage. Love this. So this is a barbecue chicken that we had last night. It was pretty awesome. Make sure that I have a little bit of everything here for the sushi roll. So now let's make the sauce. Use my gluten-free, casein-free, soy-free soy sauce. And of course, my most favorite thing in the world is crushed ginger. Love this stuff.
I thought that was garlic at first.
No, you can actually
I didn't know you
do
could buy it that way.
this. Ginger is just such a blessing for digestion. So I just made this quick sauce, super easy. So here's my cooked rice. This rice is very, very sticky. I use this really great little water and apple cider vinegar combination just to keep my hands. That's what the sushi chefs do, is a little trick, which is like pretty.
Used for apple cider.
I know, and I love that stuff. So good for you. So all I'm doing is just keeping my fingers a little bit damp so the rice doesn't stick to my fingers. And we're just pushing this all through. If your kids don't like green, not a problem. You just flip it over. So that way we can hide the green stuff from our kids and it will be rice out as part of the recipe. So let's have a little fun. We're going to do my favorite, avocado. And if you're sending this to lunch with your kids, you may want to put a little extra of the lemon on there because it will get brown. And I even have sensory issues for the brown stuff. So there we go. There's our avocado. So the next thing I'm going to do is do a couple of the cucumbers. I know, it's so easy and it's so cute and we're going to eat healthy. Yeah.
You're going to make one for me for lunch today.
Yes,
right?
you can have one for lunch. Now comes the fun stuff, the sausage.
So you could put anything in here.
Anything.
Jeez.
Anything. It's really just the simplest thing in the entire world. And then, so, you know, it's sushi kids can eat, and I wasn't joking about that. So I may squeeze a little more extra lemon on there. And now I'm going to take my little sausage, or sauce, excuse me. Just put a little bit on there so we're coating. About a teaspoon. Doesn't it look good? You can get this at any cooking food store. So this is just the little sushi roller, which I think is fun. So I'm going to put this underneath, and I'm going to start to roll. So you got to watch how you go through and roll this. So the biggest thing is to try to get it compacted enough. So when all is said and done, we can hide the green stuff. So again, with cutting sushi, you want to make sure your knife's really sharp. And we also want to get it a little wet because that way it would make it easier for cutting. So I'm going to just cut off the ends. It's so funny. These are our taster bites, Jamie. You can tell me how these taste. Go ahead and try it.
Yum.
I know, right?
See?
And your body kind of goes, wait, I'm waiting for seafood. But you've got awesome sausage, chicken. You've got a full serving of vegetables. And is that good? Yeah. Yum? You're not lying? You're not lying? Okay, good.
I like more sauce.
You like more
we
sauce?
We can even put wasabi in there if we like
yeah,
it.
if, you know, I think the wasabi, the issue...
Oh, we're making it for kids, sorry.
Yeah, we are making it for kids. This is just a fun way to introduce more foods to your kids, and notice they're eating seaweed. We'd love to hear from you. If you have an idea or you want us to convert a recipe, let us know. Jamie, thanks for being my fabulous Flannel White. You can reach us at autismlive@gmail.com or Facebook, facebook.com/autismlive. Or we have thousands of recipes on Taka Now. So, you know, go check out the Taka website and let's get cooking. So we'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us.
You say howdy, we say hi. Let's get rowdy, let's get wild. Let's get wild.
What is autism? What is autism?
What is autism?
What is autism?
What is autism?
What is autism?
I've been asking myself that for a very, very long time.
Let me think about that one.
Trying to, just,
Jeez. Let me think. Oh man, that's a big one. Yes.
Autism,
Autism is a neurological disorder that affects many of our kids in different ways.
It's a learning disability that affects the cognitive functions of the brain.
A lot of people have the misconception that it's a disability, and it's really not.
I look at it as like a special gift.
When one person thinks differently from another.
It's an opportunity for everyone to learn to understand someone that's a little different than them.
Autism is the ability to educate.
They're given so much talent in different areas.
To me, autism means a chance to be with and be around people you really care about. Autism is beautiful.
It's a way of seeing the world differently.
It's always unique, totally intelligent, and sometimes mysterious.
Happiness that comes out of my son's hard work.
It's a movement.
Unpredictable.
That's right.
Awesome. Love. The field I want to work in.
Laughter, fun, joy. Autism is beautiful to me.
I want you to remember these three words. There is hope.
And how things get discombobulated and what things really mean. That, you know, like a therapist will ask a parent to do something, and it's something.
Hi, I'm Shannon Penrod, and we're at the ABCs and XYZs of Special Needs Conference. And this year, for the first time, they've got something really remarkable. It's the Entrepreneurial Boutique. These are all items that have been made and are being sold by individuals who have special needs. So we're going to do a little shopping and talk to some of these fabulous entrepreneurs. Come on.
Talk to a therapist, and that we're going to have feelings about.
My name is Molly Rarick, and I'm founder of Breed's Gift. We're a nonprofit that serves teens and adults with special needs, like Chase here. We were founded in 2013 and serve people in the Conejo Valley, Santa Barbara, and LA.
Our main objective is to give our participants the skills they need to gain a more independent life.
What? They can hear us.
My name is Shelley Cox, and Lisa Zalagi and I are founders of Creative Steps and Create Micro Business Enterprises. And the items that we're selling here today are all made by the clients who have passions about what they want to make, and then they get the profits from what they make after we've paid all of the other expenses.
We are here today because my goal is to be independent, and also I would like to share all my artwork, and I would like to sell.
Thinking about at his young age being a businessman, you know, it's amazing. I cannot be more proud.
Welcome back.
And it took us a little while because we were having some difficulties with sound with Skype. But we've got Vince Redman on audio and on Skype. So we're going to get picture and sound from two different feeds. And so first of all, Vince, we want to welcome you back to Autism Live. We were talking about you just a few minutes before we took a break about how amazing you are. Vince is a licensed marriage and family therapist who worked in the field of autism as a behaviorist for many, many, many years. So he has experience in both those fields, and it's just a wonderful gift to the autism community that he is able, as an LMFT, licensed marriage and family therapist, to bring that perspective to be able to help families. Because this, Nancy and I were saying before, there's nothing easy about this, Vince.
No.
So welcome, Vince.
Welcome, Vince.
Hi. Hello. Hello. How are you ladies today?
We're good.
We're doing good.
And better because you're here. So, and I think we teased it to the audience because you guys could hear us. What we want to talk about, Vince, is how parents and therapists talk to each other, because it's not always productive.
Right.
And that the example that I was saying to you during the break is that, you know, sometimes the therapist, well-meaning therapists, will give us as parents, and I'm laughing because sometimes it is laughable, they'll give us some sort of task to do, like they want us to take data on something, or they want us to follow through with something at a very difficult time of the day or in a very difficult location, or when we've got other kids. And so they'll give us this task, and honestly, it brings up such emotions, does it not, Nancy?
Yes, because it's one thing to be, well, first of all, the way your child reacts differently when the therapist is there.
Yeah.
So the results the therapist can get are oftentimes almost always, 100% time, better than the results you're going to get. And then when you try to emulate the same protocol, it can be disastrous.
It can be really hard. And so they say it to us, and immediately there's a part of it that we're angry.
Yeah, because we go on the defensive. Like, you try doing it 24/7, 365.
And I always felt like a failure, right? You're going to ask me, you're setting me up for failure to do the thing I don't want to do. But a lot of times, and I talk to therapists who say, the parents will come back and say to them, well, do you have a child on the spectrum?
Right.
You know, and we get that kind, and then I think that makes them shut down. And then I was saying to you, then we're off to the races. So, talk to us a little bit about, as parents, what can we be saying to therapists when we're feeling that overwhelmed, that's productive, not, so do you have kids on the spectrum?
Right. And you're right, because that's when the animosity would start, and then the relationship breaks down from that point. I think a lot of times the genesis of miscommunication comes from parents when they, emotional reactions when they see their child struggling, or they see their child having a hard time, or, as Nancy was saying, they see the child do things that you or them as a parent aren't able to get their children to do. So sometimes it's a positive, sometimes it's a negative, and that creates these emotional reactions with many families where they aren't able to communicate their feelings appropriately to the therapist, and the therapist might ask something benign about following through with this, or please let him tantrum, let him work through this, we're going to go ahead and work through this, or again, maybe following through with language protocols and using AT devices, when it's a lot easier to just get the child something that they know that the child wants, rather than going through the steps on using an AT device. So there's lots of different reasons, but I think you're both right in that it comes from emotional reactions for different reasons, different things that come up, and how they're feeling at that time. Now, what do they do with it? How are they holding that, right? They're holding it right there. How do they communicate with the therapist? And I think honesty is the best thing, saying, I'm really having a hard time right now because he doesn't do this for me. Or I'm having a really hard time right now because it bothers me to see her tantrum, or it bothers me to see her so upset. And then this way it starts a dialogue where the therapist can then explain why they're letting the child work through the tantrum, or why it's necessary to use the AT device. Now we're guiding the conversation to where it needs to go clinically, but yet it started with the admission of, I'm having an emotionally hard time with this because ... Now everyone knows each other's points of view, and we're able to communicate better and more appropriately.
Yeah, I'm fond of telling the story. When Jem was hitting me, there was a period of time in which there were 3 different years that we cycled through, and in the spring, for whatever reason, something would happen to me or to him, but in the spring, I would get hit. And I would not just hit in the head. And I don't know how everybody else feels, but man, I got hit as a child. I don't deal well when somebody hits me in the head, even if it's my 3-year-old. Like it wasn't good for my psyche. And I was really skating on a thin edge. And I remember coming to CARD and saying, I was keeping it a secret for a while because I was embarrassed.
Right.
And I felt like I was a failure and I was ashamed. And I came to CARD and I said, at our clinic, somebody's got to help us because something bad's going to happen. I don't know what it's going to be, but he's going to punch my lights out. I'm going to, whatever. Something bad's going to happen. Help me. And they brought in the A team. And one of the people on the A team was the fabulous Art Wilkie, who I always say is like the Santa Claus of CARD, who would never make anybody mad ever. The sweetest, nicest guy, right? Vince is smiling. And Art and it was Dr. Jonathan Tarbucks at the same time. They were showing me what to do. And Art was going through this whole thing, this whole series of events to show me what to do. Because it would be when I would put him, we'd be in the grocery store. And he'd be in the little thing in the grocery store and he would start whacking at my head. And I would say, that's it, we're out of the grocery store, right? Because that was what the therapist had said to do. And so we would leave the grocery store and then I'd go to put him in the car. And now he's heavy, and I gotta bend over. My hands are full of him, and he would, and then I would have to get him into the seat and get the 5-point harness on, and I needed a helmet. And so I was, they were showing me what to do, and you're Vince, but Art was showing me what to do, and the whole time it was like there was a thin layer of smoke coming out of my head because I got madder and madder as Art was showing me what to do. And he turned around in the clinic and he was like, so do you think you could do that? And I was so angry at the lovely Art Wilkie. And he could tell, and he said, tell me, I see something in your face, tell me what, and I just started yelling at him, right? And I said, where is my purse in this scenario, Art? You don't have a purse. You're trying to show me how to do this, and you don't even have a purse, so where is my purse? Because he was doing this, and I was like, well, it must be nice to be unencumbered with a purse. And I was so mad, and he looked at me, and he was so patient, he said, is that the problem? And I said, yes, because I would have my purse hitting me in the head and my purse hitting me in the back, or my purse in the cart and somebody stealing it while I'm trying to deal with him. And Art looked at me for a second. He said, would you be willing to wear a fanny pack while we do this intervention? And I felt so stupid. And I was like, sure. You know what I mean? But that hadn't occurred to me. And then I was kind of mad that it hadn't occurred to me, and I felt ridiculous, and all I wanted to do was leave and cry. I just felt like I'm an idiot. But of course, I then went and did the fanny pack, and he stopped hitting me in the head. I'm so grateful that I did say something, but I felt stupid, Vince.
And I think sometimes that happens, right? Where parents get, shameful that they can't, tolerate their child crying, or that they don't see the bigger picture, right? They don't see that a fanny pack or a backpack would work over a purse. But that's because you're emotionally invested in it. You're emotionally dealing with it, and you're doing it with one hand tied behind your back. Where a lot of times the suggestions, while they might be a little bit logical, it's because we're not looking at that. We're looking at that micro frame of what's happening right then, right now. How do I protect myself? How do we get in fight or flight? And that's where the collaboration is so beneficial with the families and the ABA supervisors, or, assaultive behavior technicians that are able to work together, because you can look at the bigger picture, come up with alternatives, maybe that you kind of hit yourself and go, duh, I should have known that. But it's that collaboration where we come up with those beautiful interventions and beautiful ideas. It's not one or the other, it's together.
And it's always so interesting when you do access, like sometimes I don't even know what's wrong, but when you do access it and say it to these young people, it's like they're stunned, because whatever the thing is that's stopping us truly hadn't occurred to them. It's always something like really random that and that to you and I, Nancy, is like, well, duh. Of course there's a purse. Right? But why would that occur to Art, who's never carried a purse in his life? Did you ever have that back in the days when you were a therapist, Vince, where a parent said something to you that you went, okay, now I understand why you're having a problem with that?
Right, absolutely. And it goes back to kind of the comment you had mentioned where families say, well, do you have a child that's autistic? You know, one of the things I used to get when I was a young therapist was, do you have children?
Yeah.
Period. And, you know, while it came out in, you know, oftentimes in an emotional reaction, it does to give you that kind of, you know, point of view of, you don't know this. You're not getting up at 4 in the morning, and you're not having to be fully responsible for this person. And so a lot of times when the parents would bring that perspective to a situation, any behavioral situation, it could be aggressive behavior or even just non-compliant behavior or maybe, you know, self-stimulatory behavior, they bring up the point of view, what it is like for a parent who has to be responsible for so much more than the therapist or a supervisor. And that was really beneficial for me as a therapist because, you know, a lot of our young individuals or young therapists, they don't have that perspective. They're looking in through the lens of ABA and what scientifically needs to be done. But when you're able to look at the full perspective of what a parent has to do, the emotions they have to deal with, the other responsibilities that they have to deal with, then it actually becomes a better collaboration because now we as the professionals are able to understand the parental point of view, and then we hope that that opens up the door for the parents then to understand the, you know, professional point of view, and we have a good symbiosis and, you know, working relationship at that point. But the parents' point of view is extremely important. Absolutely.
And we often feel like saying to the therapist, yeah, well, you don't have to deal with it
24/7.
24/7. You walk out the door, you come in here and have a good session, and then you walk out the door. And it falls apart then.
One of the things that I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago when you were here, Vince, that the show Parenthood I thought was really interesting the way it depicted autism, because when the boy in Parenthood started therapy, the first therapist showed up, and I can't think what the name of the actress was, beautiful actress, shows up at the door to do therapy, and she's young and beautiful, and the mom was kind of feeling like, oh my gosh, you know, this beautiful young woman's going to come in, and she starts to say something to the boy, and the mom's like, oh, he's not going to be able to understand that or do that. And the therapist kind of puts up her hand. It's like, well, we're going to work on that. And within 3 minutes, she gets him to do it.
Right.
And the mom is furious.
Right.
And I the thing that's sad to me is that I totally understand that and felt the same way. Because you're supposed to be the mom and you're supposed to be the one to get the
results.
And if a young, pretty girl can come in and do it in 5 seconds, then it wasn't that he couldn't do it, it was that I couldn't get him to do it.
Exactly.
Right? And so there's that's going on. But it's so sad because these are the people who've come to help us. And sometimes we're so in our own way feeling jealous that they can get our children to do something that we won't get out of our way to learn how they do it. But it's human nature. I think we're all, you know, guilty of that. But so Vince, how can we help ourselves when we're feeling that way to remember this is a member of our team and they're doing good things with our kids, and that while there's a place for us to be jealous, it's not helping our kid.
Right. And I think that's the exact mind frame you wanted to take, is that we're all one family, right? We're all doing this together. And I know the supervision teams that I have when I'm leading a team or working with a family, I state that several times, is that we can't do this without you, just as you've turned to us for our expertise to be able to help you. There's no one person that we can take out of this equation that's going to make it better. Because I think sometimes family members feel that, well, if I'm not involved, this is going to be better. Or if I take myself out because I'm the problem, things are going to get better. And that's absolutely the opposite. That's not the case at all. Everybody, you know, participating, everybody's point of views are valuable. And taking it from the we are a team, you know, point of view, I think is extremely helpful. And it has to start from the beginning. It has to start from the very beginning, from the beginning, the time they initiate ABA services to the time that they end, is that everybody's just as valuable as the other person to that team. Because like Nancy was saying, and then Jen, you were saying as well, a lot of times when you see your child do something for someone else, you immediately take it upon yourself as a failure that I didn't do this or I couldn't do this. When we want to look at a bigger picture where, you know, we have to break down the child's behavior and see why he's doing it at home and not doing it with a new person. Because sometimes it's not anybody's fault. It was just a conditioned behavior that happened unbeknownst to us, that's why it was conditioned, because it was functional for him, right? You know, you maybe not using the AT device and just pointing at something, and grandma and dad and whoever immediately just gave him the step. Great. That was communicative. It was functional. Then when we try to bring up maybe verbal commands, the child doesn't do it because this works in the house. But then a new person comes in and they don't follow the point ever, and they only ask for a verbal command. The child then uses it, gets what they want. Now they see that this behavior I have to do with this person because that's what works. This behavior I do with that person, and that's what works. And that's why the consistency of using interventions is so important, that the team and the family are using the same methods, same behavioral interventions, same techniques or AT devices or special technologies, so that it doesn't matter who's doing it, me, mom, dad, the therapist, that the same result is what we're asking for.
You just said something a few minutes ago, though, Vince, that just opened my eyes to something I hadn't thought about before, because you said, sometimes a parent will see that the child doesn't do it when they're there, and so they think, oh, I'm the problem, and then they feel like removing themselves from the problem. Mm-hmm. See, I never felt that, but I'll bet that's what a lot of what we see in our dads stems from. Yeah. Because I have watched dads go, well, he only does that when I'm around, so maybe I'll go work more to provide, and that's how I'll help, because I don't seem to be helping doing this. I'll remove myself from the equation. And the problem that happens is the further you remove yourself from the equation, the more the kid progresses with other people, and the more it looks like it's just you. Right. Which is a false positive, right? So when we see dads doing that, Vince, pulling more and more away, what do you recommend that we do to pull them back in?
Yeah, and again, you're right. And then stereotypically, it is typically more of the fathers that you see do this. However, we do see other, family members that do it as well. Sure. I think for me, the key is to catch it early, is to not wait until there's been a lot of progress or a lot of change that's happened, and then that parent or caregiver is not involved in it, because that gap continues to get bigger at that point. And then we start dealing with other things that come up then, where the child now is not emotionally being supported by a parent, or that parent now is feeling disconnected from their own family, so that creates marital strain, those types of things. So I think it's extremely important to catch that early. So making sure that we talk to a parent that doesn't come to clinics, making sure we reach out for their point of view, making sure that they, are at least in agreement with what's going on at home. Now we can't 100% patrol or control what happens at home, but at least that they understand, us as the professionals, at least we know if they understand the interventions, the reason the interventions are there, the reason it's important for everyone to do it, then we hope we've given them, everything that they need to go ahead and follow through. But I know for myself, I've reached out to parents just to meet with them privately, to ask them what their concerns are, what are their goals, what are their expectations of treatment, even if they don't participate in our clinic meetings. So then it shows that, we value their input, and we also think that they're extremely important to this process as well, kind of countering that intuition to pull away.
We just would like to stick you in our back pocket and take you to every single parent all the time, Vince.
I know parent meetings are us, right?
But Vince, I feel like, and I've said this to other guests before, but not to everybody, right? I feel like there's a book here that you need to write. Do you know what I mean? I think that it's so hard for parents, this journey, and we were talking before about the advice that I got, that I went to a marriage and family therapist who suggested to me that we stop ABA because that seemed to be the thing that was causing all the stress. And that one of the things that I really love about you is that that's never going to come out of your mouth, you know, that you so totally get it. But I really feel like, Vince, there's a book here that you need to write that so many people would benefit from. Even if it was just a book about how to talk to your therapist and know that how to get on the same team with your therapy team.
Very important.
And I can see moms buying it to give to their husbands, but then sitting down and reading it themselves and going, oh, I need this too. Because I think we all do need that.
Yes, we do. We need to be reminded.
And also, I gotta say that, you know, we're forever, you know this, Vince, we're forever talking to the therapist about doing perspective taking and taking things from the parent's point of view. It might be an interesting read for them to go, oh, maybe that's why they're surly with me sometimes. It's not that they think I'm doing a bad job. It's that they're jealous of the fact that I can get their kid to do, because every time I've ever said that to a therapist is like, oh, well, then I'd be happy to show you how to do that. And then the relationship is so much better. So Vince, could you please write a book?
I think you and I will have to co-author one together from both perspectives.
I'm happy to be in on that.
The parent and the therapist.
And also, can I say too?
Put one together.
All right, in our spare time, of which we have none. We'll get right on that. But Vince, I gotta say this. I don't know. Have you got a new pair of glasses or what's going on? You look like a young James Caan.
No, they're the same ones.
They are?
Doesn't he look like a young James Caan?
He does.
You totally look like Jimmy Caan.
Because they finally wear long sleeves again in California.
Is that what it is?
It's fall.
I don't think so. You look like Jimmy Caan today. I don't know what. I was like, look at him. He looks like James Caan. I never noticed that before. Vince, we just adore you, and I'm so grateful for your life experience and the way you share that with parents. It's just an amazing, amazing gift to our community.
Yes, and thank you for all your support and your information today.
How can people, if they're a card client and they want to have some of your time to talk about things that are going on with them, how can a card client reach you?
They can always reach me. They can email me at v.redmond, R-E-D-M-O-N-D, as you can see my name's on there, just v.redmond at centerforautism.com.
And if somebody, because you do take private patients outside of CARD as well, if somebody, because you can do telehealth here in California, correct?
Yeah. If you're looking for counseling, we also do counseling services as kind of a cutout service. And you can email me that as well. Okay, same address. And I recommend that. If somebody's out there and they're like, well, I would go to a licensed marriage and family therapist, but I don't know where, you have that option with Vince. You could talk to him and see if you can work that out schedule-wise. I know he's busy, but, you could see what can happen. Thank you so much, Vince. No problem, ladies. Have a great rest of your month. And I'll see you next month. Okay, bye-bye. Bye-bye.
We're almost out of time.
I know, we're almost out of time. Can I take a quick second to talk about our new website?
Oh, about the new website.
Well, and tomorrow's a pretty cool show, too. We're going to have Elaine Hall on from the Miracle Project. We've got Chloe Snee on tomorrow, autism expert. She's going to be answering your questions. And then we've got an amazing woman, Wendy Dawson, is going to be on from Social Motion. They're a group in Houston that is doing amazing things with her students, which will tie into the other thing that I want to talk about. She has artisans. These are young adults, and they're artisans. They learn their craft working with Social Motion, and they get to sell their artwork.
Oh, great.
And
where's she out of?
Houston.
Oh, Houston.
Houston. And so, but, with the potential of maybe franchising and going other places. So we, this week, we launched our new website, but it's in beta right now, and people can go and check it out. And one of the reasons why I especially want you to check it out, so you have to go to http, no S, / and then it's beta.autism-live.com. And when you go there, on the top of every page is a little icon that says Toy Guide. And if you click on the Toy Guide, it shows you the 2018 Autism Live Toy and Gift Guide, where we've picked items for every age range and for every ability that we think are particularly rock stars this year. And we have some really fun stuff on there. And we included parents this year. And when you go, you're going to see that there are earrings. We chose earrings that are made by the artisans from Social Motion.
Oh, okay.
So you have the opportunity to get a pair of earrings for somebody, for a parent in your life, that have been handcrafted by an individual who's an adult on the autism spectrum, plus tons of other toys. If you, whether it's, no matter which holiday or birthday, your son's got a birthday coming up, and it should give you at least an idea for everybody from babies up through adults, and then a special section that's just about parents. I'm really proud of the guide this year, and I want to hear from you guys. And the other thing that we added this year, last year you guys said you loved the guide, but then you had to go look for the toy, you had to look it up and see where to buy it, and you said, boy, it would be nice if there were just a button that we could go right to the place where we can buy the toy, and we did that.
Good for
you. It
you.
is interactive, so you click on the thing and you go right there, and then you can order the toy right from there.
Good for you.
It takes you to their site. It's no longer our site. We're not making any money on it, but we wanted you to be able to have toys that would be toys and gifts that would be meaningful to people. We did a lot of research, had a lot of kids in trying and playing with toys, and we've got all of them stuffed in my office right now, and people have come and played and said, hey, these are fabulous, you know?
Good.
So I think we got a really good mix this year. So definitely check that out.
And what else do you have tomorrow?
So tomorrow, Chloe Snee is going to answer your questions. Elaine Hall from the Miracle Project is going to be talking with us about the kiddos that are on atypical. She's got, I think, there's a whole host of students from the Miracle Project that are regulars are on atypical. You know, it just got picked up for its 3rd season.
It did, okay.
So that's a fabulous thing. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. And then, as I mentioned, Wendy Dawson's going to tell us about Social Motion. It started as a social skills thing, but then those kids progressed, and now they have this, I mean, basically it's a workspace, and they make all kinds of keychains and other stuff. I particularly like the earrings, but they work with metal and they work with leather, and they're referred to as artisans, which I quite like. So
fantastic.
All of that is happening tomorrow. And then, of course, we're going to be back here next week. Next week is the last Wednesday show for us before Thanksgiving, because the following week we decided not to do a show on the Wednesday. It's just too crazy, the traffic in LA, you know, and when you got to cook things. But you've got, Wyatt's got a birthday between now and then.
Wyatt has a birthday on Saturday, party.
Which is very exciting.
His actual birthday is Friday.
Yeah, but he's going to be 17.
17.
How did we get here, Nancy?
I don't know. How did we?
Our boys were little when we started this.
I know.
It's full on crazy. But anyway, we'll let you know some of, like, if Wyatt's okay with that, we'll let you know about the get together celebrating Wyatt. Well, that's all for today, but we'll be back tomorrow. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me.
And give yourselves a hug from me. Bye-bye for now.
Bye-bye.